1968 was a tragic year for many Americans. In April, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. And just 2 months later, presidential candidate Robert Kennedy was shot and killed. Congress reacted by quickly passing the 1968 Gun Control Act. In 1979, the National Rifle Association started working for legislation to weaken the Gun Control Act. They argued that the act put unnecessary restrictions on the law-abiding gun owner. In 1980-81, their efforts were stalled. In December of '80, musician John Lennon was shot and killed by Mark David Chapman. 4 months later, John Hinckley Jr. unsuccessfully tried to assassinate President Reagan while seriously maiming Press Secretary James Brady. Proponents for stricter gun control pointed out that Chapman and Hinckley's guns were bought without record checks and transported across state lines. Within the last year, an NRA-supported bill has worked its way through Congress. Titled the Volkmer-McClure Bill, it has passed through Congress and is being sent to President Reagan as the 1986 Federal Firearms Law Reform Act. The final act ended up as a compromise between the National Rifle Association and Handgun Control Incorporated. Both claimed victory in a fight that pitted public safety against gun owners' rights. Portland police officer Craig Ward gives his views on the bill.
I support the Volkmer-McClure Act in most of the substance. There are a couple of provisions I'm not really happy with, but I think on balance the bill is an excellent one, and I think it's one that we've needed for some time. There are about 19 salient provisions of the bill that I'm familiar with. Most of those have to do with records-keeping requirements of the federally licensed dealers. The ones that I think affect those of us in the law enforcement community and the citizens at large are important, specifically the mandatory sentencing provision, basically a penalty enhancement for the criminal use or misuse of firearms during the course of the commission of a federal felony. And that's something that we've pushed for about 50 years now.
Attorney Tuck Wilson is co-founder of Oregon Handgun Alert.
My opinion of the bill is that it was unnecessary, and it simply illustrated the power of the NRA to overcome the reticence of millions of citizens to weaken this important legislation. I was sorry to see the bill passed. It was not passed in the form that it finally passed. It was not as bad as it might have been, but nonetheless, it is a dark day for those of us who think that a civilized society should control the sale and possession of lethal weapons.
Lake Oswego's Chief of Police, Tom Webster, is first Vice President of Oregon Chiefs of Police Association. He speaks on police and public safety.
I think that the edge that law enforcement has is that they are armed, and that we should try to assume that that edge would enhance their position because the general public citizenry is not armed. If you're going to make the handguns available and everyone is going to have free access without any type of record keeping or free delivery of handguns between states throughout the nation, I think that would definitely affect the edge, so to speak, that public safety might have.
I don't see anything in this bill that would affect that kind of street crime rate. I simply don't think that slightly relaxing the prohibitions against interstate sale of long guns is going to have any measurable negative effect on the public safety.
Is there a connection between gun availability and crime?
We believe that there is a correlation between the availability of easily concealed handguns and handgun violence. We have to decide whether we're going to live under the threat of the handgun or control it. So I do see a direct relationship. The legislation that passed the Congress weakens the ability of the federal government to regulate sales and movement of handguns and firearms generally, and makes more difficult the role of police officers in controlling the flow of handguns.
John Nichols is the legislative director for Oregon State Rifle and Pistol Association.
There's no correlation between availability of guns. If anything, I would suspect that the easing the enforcement on law-abiding citizens and putting it onto the criminal element might lower the crime rate a bit.
Gun owner Larry Jones.
It's my personal belief that there's a lot of people in this country that think that somehow the control of firearms are going to limit our social problems. I believe that's an inadequate answer to the problem. I don't think it'll work. I feel personally attacked. I've read statements by people in Congress, by other people which are attacks against my character, which are accusing me of somehow being engaged in some kind of illegal or immoral activity. And I resent it exceedingly. I resent it when I vote. I vote for pro-gun candidates, and I actively work against anti-gun candidates.
And how does Officer Ward feel about the final version of the Federal Firearms Law Reform Act?
Negotiation. So I think basically the citizens of America come off as winners in this thing. And I think that it again just demonstrates that the system does work if you let it.